Hi guys, I'll just give it
a couple of minutes for people to join and then we can start today. Okay, so let's start today's lesson. Hope you all had a good weekend. And today's lesson will be looking at files. But first we can have a review of what we've done for the last couple of weeks. So we had a look at modules where we were reusing code that other people had written, so we didn't have to rewrite lots of code. And we looked at two modules in particular. We had the random module and the math module. The random module let you do lots of randomizations of numbers or things in your list. And math let you do some mathematical things to your data. So who remembers what the floor function did? Yeah, so the floor function round down. So here we have the random module that we looked at. So we had, firstly, you remember with a module you have to import, so that's really important. The first thing you do is import your module. So here we imported the whole module by just stating import random. Then here are the couple of the functions we looked at. So we had random.random, which gave us a float from 0.0 to 1.0. And we had random.randint, and then in the brackets we put the numbers that we wanted a random number between. So here we did 1 and 10, and therefore got a random number between 1 and 10. And here with the math module, we instead of importing the whole module, we imported two functions. So as you can see from the top, we stated from math, so from the math module, import floor and ceil. So that meant we were only using two of the functions from the entire math module. And the reason we do this is because often modules can be very, very large, and if you're importing it all, it can take up memory, whereas if you just import the two functions you need, it uses less. Someone's asked what is the difference between math.floor and int. So int is just changing something to an integer, whereas math.floor is actually rounding down a float. So here are two examples. So we had a variable called number equals floor 3.2, and that meant we were going to take off anything after the decimal point and just round down. And then we'd print floor 9.99, and where in maths usually you would round that up to 10, if you're using the floor function, it will just round it down regardless. It will just know that if you input a float, it's just going to round it down to the nearest whole number. Then we had ceil. So again, we had the variable number equals ceil 3.2. And again, usually in maths, we'd think we'd round that down. But when you're using the ceil function, it would just round it up regardless. So 3.2 went to 4 and 9.99 went to 10. Then we looked at our for loops. So we had a list here, names equals Alice, Bob and Charlie. And then for person in names, we'd print person. So that would go through that names list and print each individual person out. And as you can see underneath, we have Alice, Bob and Charlie printed one under another. We also looked at while loops. So here we had while guess doesn't equal 4, and because we're stating guess in our while loop, outside of our while loop, we had to state this variable, and you can see we gave it the value none. So guess equals none. While the guess did not equal 4, it was going to continually ask for an input, and it asked for an integer input because that's what we're comparing against in our while loop. But as soon as you got the number 4, the guess no longer doesn't equal 4, and therefore the loop would break. Then we looked at infinite loops. So here we have a while true loop, and because true is always true, it would print out hello infinite amount of times. But if you wanted to not do that and you wanted to break the infinite loop, you could just use the break keyword. So here, while true, print hello, and then it would break. So it'd only do it once and then break. Then we have while loop versus for loops. So both of these loops do the exact same thing, and they're going to print to 100. They're going to print a new number on each line to 100. But there's just two methods of doing it. So if you use the while loop, you have to declare the x variable outside of the while loop. So we gave it the value of 1, and then we're saying while x is less than or equal to 100, print out the number x, but also add 1 to it each time. And that means it'll keep going up and up and up until x is smaller or equal to 100, and then once it is, it'll break out once it's not. The second way of doing it was using a for loop. So here we used our range. So for y in range 1 to 101, we just printed y, which was the number. Does anyone remember why in a for loop you go to 101 rather than 100 if we wanted to print out 100 numbers? Correct. Because Python starts at 0, we have to go to 101 if we actually want to print out the number 100. Then we looked at our collections. So there's different collections of data, and we had a list, a tuple, a set, and a dictionary, but we've focused mostly on lists and dictionaries in this course. So here is everything that we've done to a list. So firstly, we created it by stating the name of the list, names, equals, then using square brackets, and then stating each item in our list. So we have Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Then to add to our list, we used the .append function. So you'd state the name of your list, names, .append, and then your new value. And as you can see, it added Dave to the end. So if you're going to use append, it's always going to add to the end. Then we looked at changing values. So you have the name of your list, your square brackets for your index, and then whatever index number. So we used 2, and that got rid of Charlie and replaced it with Chris. Then we could delete from our list. So we had the del keyword, brackets, the name of our list, and then the index we wanted to delete. So we got rid of Bob. And then we were showing that you can use your you can use lists if you want to check something's in there. So if Eve is in names, print Eve is here. Would that statement be printed? Correct, it wouldn't be printed because Eve is not in the list names. And then you can also use your for loop to print out each name one after each other. Then we looked at tuples. So tuples are similar to lists, apart from they use the normal brackets. And can anyone remember the main difference between a tuple and a list? Correct. So the difference between a tuple and a list is you cannot change a tuple after creation, and as you can see here, all we're doing is just printing out each element of our tuple. Then we had our sets, which were again similar to lists but used curly brackets. And then we had our dictionaries, and our dictionaries are key value pairs, and so that it stored more information because you could have your key and your value. So we have a dictionary here called shirt. So the way you create your dictionary is you state the name, you have your equal signs, and then you have your curly brackets. And inside you state your key, then a colon, and then your value. So we have the dictionary shirt equals the key size and the value large, the key color, and the value red. You separate each of your keys with a comma. You can print out your values if you print and then you state the name of your dictionary and then in square brackets your key, and that's how you get your value. You can add a new key value pair by just stating the name of your dictionary and then in square brackets stating your key, an equal sign, and then your value. You can change an existing value by again stating the name of your dictionary in square brackets, state the name of the key, and then after your equal sign state the new value. You can delete a key value pair by just deleting the key, and to do that you use the del keyword, the name of your dictionary, and then in square brackets the key, and that will delete both the key and the value. And then you can use it similarly to a list to check if something is in your dictionary, or if you want to print out both your key and value, you can do that in a for loop. Then we had nested collections, and this is where it got a bit more complicated because we were putting lists within lists. So here we had our phone grid, and we wanted to print out each number, and to do that we had to have one for loop to go through each row, and then we needed a for loop within that for loop to go through each row and print out each number. And we also had a list of dictionaries, which was another nested collection. So here we have our contacts list, and then within that list we're going to have a dictionary so we can hold a bit more information about each of our contacts. So we've got their first name and their last names. So we had this for loop here. So for person in contacts, so that's going to go for each line there, that'll be the person. If phone in person, print person first name. So what would be printed if we ran this for loop? Correct, it would be Bob because only Bob has phone in his dictionary. And last week we started looking at functions. So functions is where you get to make your code a bit more powerful, and you do reuse by not repeating yourself. So here we had our first function, which was hello world. So we created it by using the function keyword of def, then the name of our function, then curly brackets and a colon. And then underneath that is the code we want to execute when we call our function. And so here, to call your function, you just state the name of your function and you have to use those brackets. Then we showed you how that you can pass parameters to your function to make them a bit more useful. So here we were going to pass the parameter name, and then we were going to print hello plus name plus an exclamation mark. Then we call the function, and in the brackets now we're going to pass whatever value we want in the name. So we passed hello Alice, hello Bob, hello Charlie. And that would have printed out hello Bob, hello Alice, hello Charlie. Then we looked at the dry principle. So does anyone remember what dry stands for? So yep, dry stands for don't repeat yourself. So that principle is if you find yourself copying and pasting the same bit of code a lot of times, then you don't need, you can put in a function instead, maybe. You just don't want to repeat yourself. So here, so if you look at this last line, we're calling hello 3 times. But instead of doing that, we can use a list to hold our names and then use for name in names and then call the function. So if we ever want to call a different function now, we only have to change one line of code instead of having to change it 3 lines as we would here. Then we also looked at how you can pass more than one parameter. So you can pass, in this function, name and age, and you can use both things in your function depending on where you pass the parameter. And again, you can have 3 parameters. You can have as many parameters as you want, as long as you declare them. We look at more advanced functions next week, which will carry this on. Then we looked at returning values. So returning values is where you get to return the values. You, the user, don't necessarily see it because you're not printing it, but you're getting that value, and then you can pass it to another function, you can pass it to another bit of code. And we also looked at recursion, and recursion is where you use a function within itself. So you call the function within itself. So here we had a function called calc factorial, and a factorial is where you times a number by each number within itself. We had if x equals 1, we're just going to return 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. Else, we're going to return x times the calc factorial x minus 1. So as you can see underneath, we pass the number 4, and then it'd do 4 times calc factorial 3 because it was x minus 1, but it's calling itself again, so it'd be 4 times 3 times calc factorial 2, and so on, calc factorial 1, and then it would times it all together. So that is recursion, calling a function within itself. So does anyone have any questions about the content we covered? I saw in the chat that people were asking how many weeks are left. So this is week 8. We've got 2 weeks of content left. Once you've done the 2 weeks, you can send us all your REPLs and get your certificate. But if you're doing the Duke of Edinburgh, or if you just want some to do a little project with us, we are in weeks 11 and 12 going to give you a project of creating some games. So it's up to you whether you join us for weeks 11 and 12, but we've done some really cool games, and it gets you to use all the knowledge you've used through the last 10 weeks to make some cool games. So to get the certificate, what you have to do is after the 10 weeks, you have to send us all your REPLs, and we'll check them, and if they're all okay and if you've done all the questions, then we will send you a PDF certificate. If you are from a school or you would like a hard copy of the certificate, you can send us your school address and we will be able to issue hard copies of the certificates. So it's up to you. I'll just check Slido and see if there's any questions on the content we've done so far. So someone's asked, what is the deadline for the submission of answers? So after the 10 weeks, we'll give you 2 weeks to a month to send in your REPLs. If it's going to take you any longer, then you can just let us know and that'll be fine. Okay, so let's get on to this week's. The certificates will have your name on them, so it's really important that once you submit your REPLs, you send it via your own email address so we can reply to you. And it's important that you state what name you would like on your certificate. Yep, so as long as you send us your REPLs via an email address so we can reply to you, and we will have your name on the certificate. So someone's asked, can we see some of the games? So if you join us after week 10, that's where we go through the games and you can see some of the stuff we've done. We've done stuff like Deal or No Deal, Snakes and Ladders, Top Trumps. So yeah, if you join us on week 11, we go through how to start coding games. Then we give you a project and you go away for 2 weeks, but we're still here, we're still on Slido, we can still help, and you get to create your own games. And we've had some people do it and they've created some really, really cool stuff. Okay, so is the games coding on Python? Yep, so everything we do for this course is all in Python. So after week 10, so in 2 weeks, that'll be the main content finished, and then from week 11, we do 2 weeks, and then from then on, me and Jake are probably going to pop up a couple of times a month to just show you some Python that we've done, some extra projects, but again, it's optional. It'll still be on Twitch, so you can just join us to learn how to do some more stuff. Okay, so let's start with week 8 content, which is files. So in Python, you can open files, and it's really important. Anytime you're going to use a file, the first thing you have to do is open it. So here we've created a variable called f, and it equals open, and then in the brackets you have to state the name of your file, a comma, and then the mode you're going to open it in. And we open this one in R mode, which is read, and we'll go through the modes in a little bit. And then you print out your file, so you do print f.read, and that would read the entirety of your file. So I will just go into my REPL and show you. So at the side here, it's not something we've used that much because we always use our main.py. But if you press this little add file button, and you can call it whatever you want, it just needs to have your .txt on the end to be a text file. So we have test.txt. So to open that file, I'm going to do, actually if we open test.txt and just put in some words, so we like hello world, so we put that in, then f equals open, and then you're putting in your quotation marks, the name of your file, and then you're going to put the mode, and this is read. Then we're going to use print f, which is our open text, and then read. And again, you need these brackets on the end, they're important. If we run that, it prints out hello world. We can add some more text into here. And then I'll run it again. And as you can see, it will go through and print out each thing in the test. So it will update itself. So that's just reading your file. Then you can do more things. So here for x in f, we're going to print x. So that's going to go through each line and print out each line on a separate line. So I will show you here. So for x in f, so that means for each line in my test file, I'm going to print out x. And as you can see, it's printed it out. Because we're using a for loop, it's going to print on each line, but the text.txt file already prints stuff on a new line, so that's why it looks like it's printed out in a double. But I could change this now to some numbers and run that. But instead, we could add them together. So we could have a total equals 0 because we're going to add things together. And for x in f, we're going to do total plus equals x. So let's run that. Do we think we're going to get any errors? Let's see why. And it's because anything in your text file, Python reads as a string. So you need to make sure that if you're going to add it together, you cast it to a string. Let's just because I'm changing it into a string, which doesn't help, but let's change it to an integer instead. Okay, so that's worked now, so all I'm missing is printing out my total after I've run my for loop. And there you go. So that's a way that you can loop through all your numbers in your file and add them together. Okay, coding time section A. So all the questions are there. For coding time section B, what you're going to need to do is in the questions, in the questions underneath Twitch, I've shared with you what you're going to need for this week. So what you need to do is click on that link, it'll bring this up, and then you need to press this fork button. And once you press this fork button, it will copy all the stuff I've done into your own REPL. So for that's for section B. So just make sure if you're going to do, when you do section B, you click on the link that I've put into the question section and press fork. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to start going through section A. I'll share the fork link in the chat as well, but it is under section A exercises in the. So if you go to the section A exercises underneath, that's where the link is. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to go through the first section A, which is so you need to, before you go through section A, you just need to make sure you fork that repo. Otherwise, you can't do the first questions. So if you click on that link, press fork, and then you can start putting your code into the main.py. But once you've forked it, you should see on the side you'll need these text files to be able to do the questions. And you write all your code in here and it will go, and if you name the files exactly as they're named here, it will go through and find them. Someone asked what's the best language for games. I've only really worked with Python, a bit of JavaScript, so Pygame is a module that's really useful for creating games in Python, but you can look at other languages and they will also be used. I think Battlefield 2 was created using Python. I think if you Google what games were made using Python, there's a long list on Wikipedia. Do we have to submit our REPLs? Because I tried to do the questions, but you went too fast. So once we finish on week 10, you'll get 2 weeks to a month to send in your REPLs. So that'll give you time to go over any questions you've missed, any questions that you want to go over again, you have time to do that after we finish on week 10. So how are you finding these questions? So the first one, you have to read the file Jabberwocky and print its contents to the screen. So someone just asked what the syntax is. So what I'll do is I'll just go back to this so you can see this is the kind of, so when you're doing section A, again, remember the first thing you need to do is open your file, and you can put that in a variable if you want. So we have done here. So the first one, you're just printing out the contents to the screen. In question 2, you're going to read the file Austen and print the amount of lines in the file. And then for number 3, each line of the file numbers.txt contains a number. Write a script to add up all the values in that file. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to start with that, and I'm here if you have any questions. Okay, so how are we finding the questions? So to get the file length, if you think about it, so think about it logically. So you think I need to go through, I know how to loop through each line, which we've got on the screen. So instead have a counter inside it as well. So think for x in f, print x, but also have another variable outside, a count, and every time it loops through, if you add 1 to that counter, you'll be able to see how many lines are in the file. So I'll just show you how I would do it. So for the one I've got currently, instead of printing out, I'm just going to add 1 to it each time. And then I can see I've got nine lines here, and in here I also I got the answer 9. So what you're doing here is it's going through, and for every time it has to loop, it's going to add 1. So that's the way of going through each of your lines and adding 1, which is counting that line, and add them together. So that's a way of doing question 2. And then question 3, we went through, but so instead of having the total plus 1, you're going to do total plus x. But remember, numbers in a text file are still strings, so you always have to cast them if you're going to add them together. Okay, so that was coding time A. So let's carry on with the second half. So when I said earlier there was R was read mode, there are 4 different modes when you're handling your files. So the first one is R, and that reads. So that opens a file for reading, but if that file doesn't exist, you'll get an error. So I'll show you what kind of error you'll get. So if I change this test to test123, which doesn't exist, you'll get this kind of error. So it says no such file or directory, test123. So if you try to read a file that doesn't exist, you'll get an error. The next one is A for append, and that opens up a file for appending. So that what that means is that we add them, we add to the file. If the file doesn't exist, using A will append to it. Then there's W, which is write. So that opens a file for writing, and it will create the file if it does not exist. And the difference between A and W is that A will append. So if you have something in your file already, it'll just add it to the bottom, whereas W will overwrite everything. And X is create, and that creates a specified file for you, and it will return an error if that file already exists. So if you see here, I've changed it back to test.txt, but this time I've done an X instead of an R. If I run that, I'm getting an error because the file already exists. So there are your different ways of handling files. And again, you just put them, so you do f equals open, then the name of your file, and then a comma, and then whatever mode you want it to be in. To get the files, Jake has put a link in the chat. You click on that, and then you click the fork button at the top, and it will take you to have all the files. Okay, so this is a way that we can write to a file. So we here have our f variable again, and again the first thing we're doing is opening our file. So f equals open. We've got example.txt, and then we're using our w, which is write, and if we do f.write hello world, and then we need to close our files afterwards. So let's test that out. So as you can see at the side, we currently only have main.py and test.txt, but now I'm going to change this to example.txt, and we're going to write to it. Then we'll write hello world, and then we close our file. And always remember, when you're doing your close, you need the brackets at the end. So if we run that, and now if you look on the left, we have a new file called example.txt, and it's got hello world in. Now if I put in hello world exclamation mark, so it's different, I will run that again, and if I go back into my example.txt, as you can see, it's just overwritten. It's not appended, it's just overwritten. Whereas if I change that to, if I change in my main.py a here, and I put in 2 exclamation marks, and I check my example.txt, you can see it's just adding rather than append. So this is appending, so it adds, whereas if you use the W, it will just overwrite everything. So if I change that back to W, and I go back in, it's overwritten. So as you can see from the second example, so for the first one, I'm writing hello world, and then the next time I'm appending, it's nice to be here. So that means it will add it to the bottom rather than overriding it. So you can increase the power of your code by, you can use while loops. So here we've got a variable f equals open names.txt, and we've got the a, so that means we're going to append, and we're saying while the name, because we're declaring name, we have to state it outside of the loop and state that it's true. So while name is true, then name input equals input enter a name. Then we're going to write that name every time it's entered to our file, and then at the end, once we've finished, we will close it. So let's transition over to our REPL and have a go at writing this one. So we're using our f variable to open, and this time we're going to call this one names.txt, and I'm going to append to it because each time I add a new name, I want to be able to add to it, not overwrite it. Then I'm going to create my while loop, and I'm saying while name is true. You can see because I've not declared it, I need to declare it outside of the while loop. So we have while name is true, name equals input, enter a name. And then every time a name is written, we're going to do f.write name, and then we'll close it. Okay, so it's asking for a name, so I'll do Saf, Jake, Sanj, Gray. Then if I just press enter, name is not true anymore, so it'll close the loop. And then if I go into names.txt, you can see that we've got all the names, but they're all on one line, which is something we might not want. So all we have to do in that case, as we know from previous weeks, is to add a /n. So if I run that again, do the same names, Saf, Jake, Sanj, Gray, and we look back into our names.txt, you can see it's added it straight away to the first one, and then we've got each of these on the new line. Because I had it in append mode, it just added it to the file. It didn't delete anything that was in there. So let's see if I change this to a W, what will happen. So we'll try again. So we know at this point our names.txt has some names in it. But now I use W, it's gone and it's overwritten everything and it's made it empty. So if I add some names, and we go back into our names.txt, you can see that it's got rid of everything that was there previously, and it's just added the names we put on a new line. And now we're on to coding time, section B. So I will show you again how to, if you've not forked the repo, I will show you how to do that. So if you go into the section 8 answers on Twitch, and you enter that link into your browser. So I'll just copy that link. So I've copied it up, and as you can now it's giving me all these files. All you need to do is press this fork button here. So it's at the top next to your run button. If you press that, it will create a new REPL for you in your account, or not in your account, but it'll just create a new REPL for you so you can do all the questions from this week. So if you have any questions, don't forget you can go to Slido. The code is Python 2020. We'll be checking these at the end of each day. And the next session is on Thursday, the 2nd of July at 10 AM, where Jake will be going through the answers for all of these questions. So do we submit our week 8 code separately after the 10 weeks? So you just, after the 10 weeks, you just submit all of your code all together. You'll just send all the URLs for each week in an email. So that's how you send them all. Can you put answers to previous questions on Twitch or something? So we've got all our, if you go into the About section in Twitch, if you go into the FAQs, we have our playlist on YouTube that has all the weeks and all the answers to all the weeks. So you can go through, and any that you've missed, you have the opportunity to go back into them and rewatch them if you've missed any answers or any questions. Why does my register file have thousands of names I entered? I'm not sure. So if you go into the file before you do any code on it, have a look what's in it. If you're in the append mode, it's going to just keep adding. If it's the W mode, it'll overwrite. So it depends what you want to do. So for section B, for the question, ask the user to enter their name and append this to the file called register.txt. So that's going to be very similar to what we've done here, where we've done it to names.txt, but you're going to do it to register.txt. The next one, we're going to create a new file called even.txt that contains only the even numbers from the file numbers.txt. So for that, you are going to probably look at how we work out if something is even or odd, which we've done in a previous lesson. And if it's even, you can write it to your new even.txt file. The next one is secret.txt contains a secret message. Each number represents the letter of the alphabet, where 1 equals A, 2 equals B, all the way to Z equals 26. Work out what the secret message says. So for this one, you can use a dictionary or a list. And in your dictionary, you could have the key of 1 equals the value A, and so forth. And then you can loop through your list to match up the number to the value of the letter. And then the last question is Benford's law. So Benford's law is a real law, and it states that it has a pattern, and the pattern is that if you have a collection of data, the first digit is usually going to be 1 or 2, and the most digits at the start will be 1 or 2, and they'll be less likely that they'll be 8 or 9. But when people create random data, it will be perfectly random. So each number will show up at the exact amount of times as the others, which is around 11%. Whereas in Benford's law saying that, well, in actual fact, you should have about 30% of number 1, and so forth. So it's an easy way to work out if data is fake or not, because if the numbers are distributed perfectly, it's likely to be fake, whereas if they are mostly ones at the beginning, it's more likely to be real data. So again, you can use maybe a dictionary to count up the first index of a number. You can check what that number is, and you can add it so you can see which numbers start with which number most frequently. So anyone struggling with the questions, remember Jake's going to be going through all of these on Thursday, so you'll have him going through with an explanation which will be able to help you further. So again, that session will be on Thursday at 10 AM, where Jake will go through all the answers for the questions today and going through the explanations. So I won't be going through, I can help you with some of the questions, but again, Jake is going to go through them. So for part 2, question 1, that's very similar to what we've done here, but instead of using names.txt, you're going to use register.txt. So if there's no more questions in Slido, there's no more questions in the chat, I'll wait around for the next 5 minutes to make sure there's not, but if not, you can carry on with the first section or section B. Someone's asked for question 4, how do we do about 30%? So you're going to just check how many times a number comes up for the first number. So you will be able to check whether it's 30%, but you won't create the 30% because we've already created the 3 files for you to check. So for question 2, if the file's already created, remember you can use your W to overwrite it, or you can just delete that file and start it again. So for that one, it will be checking whether your code works to see whether you are able to work out which are even and put to another file. We've called it even.txt, but you can call it something else as long as your code works for that to happen. So we're not looking for about, it'll be 30% definite. That's for you to work out. So you will be able to tell which is fraudulent data by which one is has around 30% of number ones or twos. Some data will have exactly the same amount of numbers starting, and that's how you'll be able to tell. But again, once you work through it, you'll be able to see the answer. Again, don't forget, if you work on it a little bit later and you want to send us some questions, the Slido will be open all week, so you can feel free to send any questions then. If not, again, Jake will be going through these on Thursday at 10 AM. Hopefully you'll all have had a good go at them before that and can see the different ways that we do it. You'll be able, because again, with coding, there's lots of different ways to get the right answer. So we could do it a different way to you, the same way to you. As long as you're getting the right answer, that's the main thing. So I'll just check again, see if there's any new questions in Slido. We have no new questions in Slido. Anything in the chat? It says my voice is glitching. Luckily, we've got 1 minute left, so with that, again, remember these videos, as soon as I finish, they'll be on Twitch for 14 days, so you can go rewatch if you need to look at the syntax. And on Thursday, we put them onto YouTube, so they're there indefinitely. Make sure when you're using f.write, you need the brackets on the end, otherwise it won't like it. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. We have no more questions in the chat or in Slido, so I shall see you all on Thursday. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you soon. See you later.